Welcome to the first round of the Brewmaster Challenge, fellow wizards. In their fight against the Spike Scourge, our 8 competitors may need some help. From the future, the brewers were allowed to choose any pre-modern card that is not banned or on the watch list. They were then given 4 days to build an otherwise Atlantic legal 93-94 deck that also includes 4 copies of their chosen card. Remember, the finalists will need to win once with each of their spicy brews to be crowned the champion. Let's take a look at the round 1 bracket. This episode will feature Eliot and Florian. Best of luck, brewers. Don't forget to vote for which brew you like best at the end of this video. Hello, wizard. Tell us a bit about yourself and your magic history before we dive into your round 1 submission.
Hello, well, I'm Eliot, also known as Beta Sedge Troll on the internet, also one of the sometimes co-hosts of the Flipping Orbs podcast, if you may have heard of me there. I'm a beast of the bay, repping my attire here, so hopefully I'll get some bonus points in the voting for that. Let's see, I've been playing with the old cards since '94, and always kind of stuck with it. Took a few years off in between, but never really got rid of my collection. Came back to the game around 2009, 2010. Was very pleased to still have all this old stuff, and built a cube, vintage cube back then, which led me to get a bunch of old black bordered nonsense back when it was still relatively cheap, and sure glad I did, because then when I discovered old school around 2014, that all came in very handy. So been a stalwart member of the Beast of the Bay since we started meeting up regularly a couple years ago, and still going strong, traveling to a lot of events as much as I can now, a little baby, which is not as much probably. Missed out on NoobCon this year, sadly, but still trying to catch up on all the 16 hours of streaming that I missed. And yeah, I don't know. Guess that's my history. How's that work?
Quite excellent. So what did you brew, and why did you choose the card from the future that you chose?
All right. So this was an interesting challenge, the card from the future. So like I mentioned, I took a considerable period off kind of in between from when I started playing Magic till the most recent iteration, I guess. And that time was basically 1998 was when I stopped actively collecting and playing, which is, I think, Stronghold was the last set that came out that I bought booster packs of, basically, before I kind of took a break. So most of the pre-modern card pool I had never seen. I mean, I occasionally here and there on the internet or whatever, but I had no familiarity with these cards. I started looking through the spoiler, but it's 4,000 cards. I mean, I don't know, I got to like D and then I gave up. So I didn't exactly know where to start. I didn't have a clear sense of a particular thing that I really liked from pre-modern. I've never played pre-modern. It just is not in my wheelhouse, really. So what I figured I would do is take an archetype that I really like in old school anyway and try to make it better with pre-modern. So fortunately, it came close to the beginning of the alphabet. Like I was saying, I kind of went, just started going through the spoiler, and as soon as I got to A and found Argothian Enchantress, I knew what I had to do. Since, as you may know, if you've seen these the hero cards from NoobCon, my favorite card is listed as Verduran Enchantress. So I was playing the long game there by putting that in. So I had to make sure that I could get my Verduran Enchantress in play. I mean, the problem, as we know, with Verduran Enchantress is that the correct number of Verduran Enchantresses in a deck is 0. I mean, if you're making an Enchantress deck, you start off with 4 Verduran Enchantress, and then as you kind of tweak it a little bit, you cut to 3, and then you cut to 2, and then you cut them entirely. But Argothian Enchantress is way better than Verduran Enchantress. It really solves the problem of just being bolt or swords bait, and then you're left doing nothing. So because I really like the Enchantress archetype, but Argothian Enchantress makes it way better, that's why I chose that. So you can see what I brewed is basically, I don't know if it's your traditional Enchantress deck. I guess it's not. I thought about going with kind of the 5-color all-in combo, draw your whole deck and win with a fireball kind of situation.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't quite feel as interesting to me. I kind of want to do something a little bit different from that. So I decided to go with an Underworld Dreams approach. So that's the win condition here. It's pretty similar, I suppose, to a fireball version. But the idea here is to ultimately mirror universe and then win with Underworld Dreams, or possibly combo off with Underworld Dreams and playing Time Twister several times. That's also an option, since you can recur it. And yeah, most of the deck is just a bunch of 1 and 2 drop enchantments to draw a lot off of my 6 enchantresses, and some mana acceleration, some restricted cards. That's pretty much the plan. I opted to include a couple of what I think are some spicy enchantments, an oubliette in case we run into some creature trouble, and a paralyze, and I can tutor those up, obviously. Energy Flux, honestly, I put that in because I always want to put main deck Flux in a deck. At this point, it's become a habit. I'm actually not sure it's that good because this deck is kind of combo oriented, and by the time I drop the Flux, I'm going to go off, and it's not going to matter that I had Flux. I probably should have some other kind of enchantment artifact removal instead.
Sure, you don't have too many artifacts, though.
I don't have too many artifacts, no. But I mean, I don't think I'm going to get that much benefit out of playing a Flux because I'm trying to combo off quickly, right? Like sitting there and trying to grind out the opponent to kill their artifacts slowly is not going to work. I like Evil Presence. I like Wild Growth. We're brewing in the Atlantic format, so Wild Growth becomes a lot more playable because there's only one strip mine to contend with. So that was another reason I chose this approach. What else? I don't know. I went down to, obviously I started with 4 Underworld Dreams, but that was actually one of the last cuts I made, was to go to just 3 Underworld Dreams. I think I put Recall in as the swap for that last Underworld Dreams. I realized that I don't really need one on the first couple turns. I just need it to win, right? So eventually, having 3 seemed fine. But yeah, that was pretty much my theory. I went with no City of Brass. I don't know. I kind of like playing 12 duels if I can, and keeping a couple basics in there just in case. And obviously, I do have the 4 Birds of Paradise to help with some acceleration and color fixing as well. And they can soak up some bolts and swords that I did include 2 Verdurn Enchantress, obviously, just because you have to. So maybe the birds will eat the bolt that otherwise would have gone their way.
Sure.
But yeah, the other good thing about our Argothian Enchantress is she does not die to the Abyss.
That's true.
There's even that. I thought about including like Concordant Crossroads in here as a way to combat the Abyss. Don't need it. She's so yeah. And as you can see in the photo, unless we've doctored it successfully by the time this is published, I don't actually own 4 Argothian Enchantress, but I put some exciting proxies in there of some Urza Saga card that I did find at the same casting cost. So we'll see if post production can fix that up. But
so what's your favorite interaction in this deck? Could be exciting or just something that you particularly like to do in a deck like this.
Well, I mean, the goal of this deck is to just draw as many cards as possible over a short number of turns, right? I mean, it's really a combo deck that's trying to go off.
Sure.
I goldfished it a few times. I wound up in situations where I had 15 cards in my hand on turn 4 or whatever. You can't lose in a situation like that. So I guess my favorite thing is probably having Fast Bond in play and just having the engine going, where you play a land, you play a Wild Growth, you've got 2 Enchantresses out, you draw 2 more cards, you play another land, you play another enchantment. You keep generating more mana with the Wild Growth, and then you keep just getting to keep those cards coming by playing enchantments and drawing more and more cards until you can combo off. Obviously, the risk is that you run into some disruption, right? If you're relying on a win through Mirror Universe and then passing the turn or whatever, then you might run into trouble. So you probably need to find Time Walk a lot of the times to actually make this deck work. But like I said, the whole point of the deck is to get 1 or more Enchantresses into play and then just start going off. I feel like you can pretty consistently do that on about turn 4 if you don't run into serious disruption. And that's pretty much the most fun, I guess. Evil Presence, I did include a couple copies of that, so getting to use. I haven't obviously really played this deck. This is mostly theory crafting, but in theory, putting an evil presence on like a Library of Alexandria would be very satisfying. So I would put that as maybe my favorite hypothetical interaction that could happen.
I was also looking at the Animate Dead, and there's something I've seen before where you animate dead your Bartle Runax, and that's okay to do because he just can't be targeted by. So I think you can reanimate your Argothian Enchantress actually, and that's okay.
Right, because it's not, once she's in play, it's not targeting her. That's correct. So that in case I suffer an earthquake or something and I need to get her back, that works. Also, it's in there potentially as to get an opponent's creature if I needed to win.
Probably more often going to be the case where you try to take their creature,
or even just get a Birds of Paradise back and draw a card because you have an Enchantress in play. That's a perfectly good line.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of tough, whittling down which enchantments to put in here. I mean, obviously, you need a critical mass of enchantments in an Enchantress deck. I think this one does a pretty good job. What do I have? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Is that right? 18 enchantments. That seems like a good number to me. I mean, having 20 would be great. I've tried to play Enchantress decks with 12, and that's really not enough. So I think somewhere in the 16 to 22 range is probably where you want to be, and I feel like this deck does a pretty decent job of being there. And of course, they mostly need to be 1 and 2 to cast, or else you're not really going to be able to go off. Assuming you're trying to do an engine that all combos off, they need to mostly be 1 and 2 to cast. I thought about doing like a Hurricane win where we can Dark Heart of the Wood to gain some life, and then Hurricane for the win or some nonsense like that. I don't know, but Underworld Dreams, cool card. Figured I would stick with that. It can win the game, even without doing some crazy combo stuff potentially. So you've always got that backdoor. That's there you have it. I mean, I guess I'll say Enchantress, one of my favorite cards. I've tried to brew a lot of different Enchantress decks in old school. One of my go-tos was the Enchantress Rabbit Wombat Voltron approach, where you put a bunch of unstable mutations, Spirit Link or whatever on a Rabid Wombat. You keep drawing cards off the Enchantress, and then you attack for 15 with the Rabid Wombat. That's a lot of fun. That is, opponent's removal is way too good, right? Because they for 1 you, and I figured that Argothian Enchantress makes that problem even worse because she can't be targeted, so she would soak up the removal, and then the Wombat is just never going to survive. So that's why I did not go that way.
Makes sense. So I have one last question for you. So if you make it far enough, you'll have to play this deck. So what are you? I realize that there's unknowns at this point because the other additional rounds will be different challenges. So, but what are you generally kind of worried about playing? Right? There's no sideboards because of the way that the matches go. So, so what are you kind of worried about playing against? What do you think this has some trouble against, that sort of thing?
Well, I mean, a deck with 4 disenchants could be a problem for me. I need to keep that Underworld Dreams in play most likely in order to win, and I've only got 3 of them. So I do have some recursion, so I might have some answer to that. But also counter spells, any kind of control deck that's just going to stop me from starting my engine. There's not a whole lot that I can do with a Dark Heart of the Wood in play and a Paralyzed when you don't have any creatures, right?
Sure, yeah.
That's not going to be, and a couple Wild Growths on my basic forest. Like that's not anywhere. So yeah, control probably going to be a problem if I don't get a fast enough start. And I feel like I can probably race a mid-range deck fine. So I'm not too worried about that. And even an aggro deck, I've got a couple answers to slow them down. I got Mirror Universe, which is very useful against aggro or burn. So, but yeah, it's hard to know because we don't know there could be some crazy archetypes, other combos. I don't know what's out there. Like I said, I don't even know what most of the cards that are available in this weird future, situation is. So who knows what's out there? I don't know what to be worried about. But usually white cards. I'm worried about white cards. I considered main deck Gloom in this deck, but didn't make the cut.
Didn't make the cut. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Eliot. It was good to talk, and good luck in the voting process. Hello, Wizard. Tell us a bit about yourself and your Magic history before we jump into your round 1 submission.
Thank you, Guardian. I will. I played Magic in the era of revised 4th edition until Homelands, so it's not a long phase per se, but maybe I got distracted by other things, namely women, or my funds were low, or the sets were just too bad back then, so I stopped. And I re-entered the Realm of Dominia in, or the like, end of 2015. Tried a bit of the back then sets, but they sucked. So I bought the old cards that I knew. I did not have any spells left. And I found out about old school beginning of 2016 then, and started playing Skype Magic ever since. So my period with old school is longer than I used to play back in the day. And yeah, ever since I tried to play via Skype and in Central European tournaments due to some limitation when it comes down to traveling. So maybe you've heard of me in one of those tournaments that I host or I attend, or through the online community.
Excellent. Well, so why don't you tell us about what you brewed and specifically why you chose the card from the future that you chose?
Card from the future, yeah. As just explained, I do not know the majority of the card pool that we're talking about here, where we could choose one particular card from, so I had to dig a bit. Roughly 5,000 cards are in that pool, and I'm quite sure that I only know around 4,000, or maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less. What I could find was not so nice, so a friendly mage who is originally from New Zealand but based in Berlin showed me a nice card. Namely this one. Yeah, great. It's a bit glary, so this is Gush. And well, it's a nice card. I'm typically not a combo mage, if you might call it like that, but like to test with aggro control mid-range. But this is a pretty nice card. It's easy to acquire it, and the deck where it could fit as a playset is also very, very easily to choose. So I brewed Mirror Ball, but with Gush, so Gush Ball, Gush Mirror, whatever you may call it. And the idea behind it is basically to pop up many lands with maybe I should.
There we go. Perfect.
Unsleeved it. With fast bonds, you can return them to your hand with Gush, which says 4 colorless and 1 blue, to draw 2 cards, or alternatively, you can just return 2 islands to your hand to do so. And with fast bond, it's easy, because fast bond or mirror ball basically wants you to play as many lands as possible to build up your mana base, crack the mirror universe, and fireball the opponent with the lands or the mana you have. And drawing cards is very crucial, as well as playing many lands.
Sure. So in your deck here, you've played a deck like this before, if I recall, and something similar at some point in the past, right?
Not really, no. No, I did not. What I did with the similar color combination was Mesh and Head Brew, basically to it's green and black basically, but every deck is more or less blue. So Mesh and Head is more to ramp up into big creatures very quickly and then just explode with Berserk. So the theme is similar-ish, but totally different, because this deck obviously can't do anything, whereas creatures can attack, and this deck just wants to recall Time Walk, regrowth Time Walk, do some Time Walks, and or just draw cards and play lands.
I see, yeah.
But acquainted mages of mine like Svante and Tilo, for example, they tried it, and they played it
Ah.
quite heavily in tournaments. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate this one force of nature in your deck here.
Yeah, well, at least one creature, and Force of Nature actually was the first card, the first card where I had a black border playset.
Ah,
So that card is very dear to my heart as well, and the alpha version obviously has the beautiful GG,
right,
so double good games where
right.
you can mock your opponent that the game is done.
Nice, yeah.
Right. So that's yep, at least something.
So, have you? I'll assume you haven't played any games with this yet. I mean, you will have to, of course, at some point. But what do you expect is kind of the most exciting interaction with this deck? You know, it could be interaction within your own cards, or interactions against other decks you think you might have to play against, or anything along those lines.
My hope would be, and my goal would be, to play as good as some other mages played with this kind of deck or mirror ball against me, and that is what I briefly described earlier, to do broken stuff with restricted or formerly restricted cards. Basically, dig your library, recall regrowth time walks, use multiple turns to build up the mana needed, and then just explode and do a lethal punch, basically.
Sure.
That was the plan all along. So the mana is plenty in here,
Mhm.
and the burn spells, well, are sufficient, I hope, with 3. And there is one Miser Disintegrate as well, instead of the 3rd Fireball,
Sure.
just to get rid of the obnoxious set trolls that I usually play very often. So just to save some time or to win some time.
It's good that you have one of those, since your opponent for the round is Beta Sedge Troll. So that's quite useful.
Yep. So that's specifically against him, but no, I think that the greater goal that we are trying to beat here, or the greater opponent that we are trying to beat here, is maybe has the force of regeneration as well,
Sure.
the power of regeneration, and then I could just exile him.
Sure. Sounds good. So I've got one last question for you. I mean, you obviously don't know what the future rounds hold, right? Because each round will be a different challenge. But what do you think in general this deck has a hard time against? What are its good variety of matchups, right? You can't sideboard, right, in the way that we do the final round, right? So kind of, just what are your thoughts on that side of things?
Any form of control would be the toughest matchup, because I only played 3 counter spells, and they are randomly assigned. Everybody knows that Mana Drain is the best counter spell. I think counter spell in most occasions runs a second, and Power Sink is an obvious choice in my deck. But every deck with 5 or 6 counter spells, or balance as control versions, to limit my lands in play, or my cards in hand.
Sure.
That would be a tough matchup. I think the extremely quick aggro versions might be an issue, but one purpose of this deck is to lose life. That's one reason to play Force of Nature as well, right? So I'm not that much afraid of it, especially since I can build up a mana base and just shoot the small bastards with a fireball.
Sure, yeah, or even just a quick mirror universe, right?
Yep, mostly afraid of the deep control, the deck-like versions of different decks. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thank you, Florian, and best of luck to you in your voting round here. And we'll talk to you soon.